Here we're going to discuss neck work. So with Erica laying flat on a table, she's gotten a lot of work so far. It's nice to end a lot of sessions with some neck work. Here I'm going to look at Erica's ability to rotate and flex and move her neck around and observe for any restrictions. And then with passive movement, we're going to take her neck through the PNF patterns, flexion, extension, and rotation, all at the same time. Lateral flexion, upward extension of the cervicals, and a little rotation. And from side to side, I might find small differences, and whichever side I do find a little difference in, a little more restriction, I'm going to encourage her to stretch that way by asking for resistance to the opposing side. And with my left hand, I'm directing the force for Erica to roll her neck into, provide some resistance there, so she can get a better idea of how her muscles are firing in those ranges. I'm going to shift my force depending on where I feel some lines of restriction. Here she's nodding her head against my hand so we can get a little more extension. And same thing with a little rotation and lateral flexion. I'm going to get her to do the opposing work against my hand as I encourage her further and further into lateral flexion to the right and rotation to the left with some extension. Trying as best as possible to use the atlanto-occipital joint as a pivoting angle here. But obviously the rest of the cervicals are going to be moving as I test for her ability to flex her neck. And now the resistance is her going into extension and lateral flexion backwards. You can also look at just one motion at a time, such as lateral flexion. I feel like that is a limiting factor. So she's limited to the left. I'm going to resist her as she goes to the right. I'm providing just a general bit of effort here. Not a whole lot, maybe 10 to 20% of her strength. And I'm always supporting her neck with the other hand. And as she begins to loosen up a little bit more, I can direct the stretch deeper down her cervical spine and ask for her to initiate the movement from a little bit more towards her center. You don't have to use a whole lot of effort here or spend a whole lot of time in the contraction phase of the stretch, because you're dealing with smaller muscles that can fatigue pretty quickly. I'll end the work with a little bit of tracking along the occiput. give her a little more sense of space along her cervical spine.